The most dangerous people in society are not the obviously ignorant, but those who believe their expertise grants them the wisdom to plan the lives of millions. This may sound harsh, but after decades of studying how knowledge actually works in society, I've reached a profound conclusion that challenges everything we're taught about expertise and central planning. The brilliant professor who designs welfare systems has never lived in poverty. The monetary expert crafting interest rate policy has never struggled to secure a small business loan. The healthcare administrator reorganizing hospitals has never performed emergency surgery at 3 a.m. Yet these experts confidently reshape entire sectors of human activity based on their specialized knowledge. Here's the shocking truth: the more specialized an expert becomes, the less they understand about the complex interactions their decisions will create. This isn't a criticism of their intelligence or dedication, it's a fundamental limitation of human cognition that no amount of education or good intentions can overcome. Today, I'll reveal why expertise, divorced from the feedback mechanisms of practical experience, becomes not wisdom but dangerous ignorance. You'll discover how the knowledge problem makes even the most brilliant experts systemically blind to the consequences of their interventions. Most importantly, you'll understand why the humble shopkeeper making daily pricing decisions possesses knowledge that entire committees of PhD economists cannot replicate. The implications will transform how you view every expert recommendation, every policy proposal, and every grand plan to improve society through centralized management. Chapter 1: The Illusion of Comprehensive Knowledge. What transforms a bright graduate student into a dangerous expert? The moment they begin to believe their specialized knowledge grants them comprehensive understanding of complex social phenomena. This transformation represents one of the most serious threats to human prosperity and freedom. During my years observing the Austrian war economy, I witnessed brilliant minds commit catastrophic errors not from lack of intelligence, but from fundamental misunderstanding of what they could know. Engineers who could design magnificent bridges suddenly believed they could design entire economic systems. Mathematicians who could solve elegant equations assumed they could calculate optimal resource allocation for millions of people. The knowledge problem isn't merely about having incomplete information, it's about the impossibility of any mind or committee grasping the infinite web of knowledge necessary for central coordination. Consider what an expert must know to successfully plan just one sector of the economy. They need not only technical knowledge about production processes, but also intimate understanding of consumer preferences, local conditions, changing tastes, seasonal variations, cultural factors, and thousands of other variables that change constantly. But here's what makes the problem truly impossible: most of this crucial knowledge exists only in the minds of individuals engaged in specific activities. The farmer knows when soil conditions require different planting techniques. The retailer knows which customers prefer morning shopping. The mechanic knows which repair methods work best for local driving conditions. This contextual, practical knowledge cannot be transmitted to central planners through reports or statistics. Scientific training actually makes this problem worse, not better. Scientists learn to control variables, isolate factors, and create reproducible conditions. These methods work magnificently for understanding natural phenomena, but social phenomena are fundamentally different. In society, everything connects to everything else through networks of voluntary exchange and mutual adjustment that no scientific method can fully capture. The expert's specialized training creates a peculiar form of blindness. The more deeply they understand their narrow domain, the more confident they become about areas outside their expertise. The monetary economist believes understanding money markets qualifies them to redesign banking systems. The public health expert thinks epidemiological knowledge enables them to restructure entire societies. This confidence isn't mere arrogance, it's scientism, the inappropriate application of natural science methods to social phenomena. When experts approach society like a machine to be optimized rather than a complex adaptive system to be understood, they inevitably create what I call constructivist plans that ignore the evolved wisdom embedded in existing institutions. The tragic irony is that genuine expertise requires precisely the humility that specialization tends to eliminate. True understanding of any complex system begins with recognizing how much you cannot know, how much depends on factors beyond your control, and how much wisdom exists in arrangements you didn't design. Chapter 2: The Fatal Conceit of Planning. The most intelligent people often make the most dangerous social planners because intelligence convinces them they can transcend the limitations that constrain ordinary mortals. This fatal conceit, as I've termed it, leads brilliant minds to attempt what is logically impossible, replacing the coordinated knowledge of millions with the concentrated knowledge of a few. Central planning appeals to intellectuals because it appears rational, systematic, and scientific. Who wouldn't prefer conscious design over seemingly chaotic market processes? Who wouldn't choose deliberate optimization over apparently wasteful competition? The planning mentality promises to replace the messiness of voluntary exchange with the elegance of rational organization. But this appeal rests on a fundamental misconception about how complex order actually emerges. Planners observe the magnificent complexity of market economies, the coordination of millions of specialized activities, the intricate supply chains spanning continents, the seamless provision of thousands of products to consumers, and assume this complexity must have been designed by some intelligence. They commit what I call the anthropomorphic fallacy, attributing the characteristics of human design to systems that emerge through entirely different processes. A market economy no more requires a central designer than a language requires a central vocabulary committee. Both evolve through countless individual adaptations and selections that create order far more sophisticated than any single mind could plan. The planning mentality fundamentally misunderstands the nature of social coordination. Planners see apparent inefficiencies, multiple gas stations on the same corner, competing restaurants offering similar food, parallel research programs investigating the same questions, and believe these duplications could be eliminated through rational organization. They fail to understand that this apparent waste serves essential functions, providing backup when one supplier fails, enabling discovery of superior methods, and maintaining the competitive pressure that drives continuous improvement. When experts design systems from the top down, they inevitably create what appears rational to them but proves dysfunctional in practice. They optimize for variables they can measure while ignoring factors they cannot quantify. They create elegant organizational charts that ignore the informal relationships that actually make institutions work. They design incentive systems that produce precisely the opposite behaviors they intended. Soviet planning provides the perfect case study in expert failure. The most educated, scientifically trained minds in Russia applied the most sophisticated planning techniques available, supported by vast bureaucracies and unlimited state power. They possessed detailed statistics, elaborate mathematical models, and comprehensive 5-year plans that covered every aspect of economic activity. Yet they could not match the performance of systems guided by the irrational price mechanism. Why? Because no amount of expertise can substitute for the knowledge coordinating function of free markets. Prices aggregate information from millions of participants in ways that no planning committee could replicate, no matter how brilliant or well-intentioned. The planning mentality persists because its failures are attributed to insufficient expertise, inadequate data, or poor implementation rather than fundamental impossibility. Each failure leads to calls for better experts, more comprehensive planning, and greater centralized control, exactly the opposite of what the knowledge problem suggests. Understanding the fatal conceit of planning means recognizing that the most dangerous policy proposals often come from the most qualified experts, because expertise without humility leads inevitably to interventions that disrupt the knowledge coordination mechanisms that make prosperity possible. Chapter 3: The Price System, Democracy of Knowledge. While experts debate in conference rooms, millions of ordinary people participate in humanity's most sophisticated information system without realizing its extraordinary complexity. Every price in a free market represents a compressed summary of knowledge that no expert committee could possibly compile, process, or update with anything approaching the speed and accuracy of spontaneous market coordination. Consider the simple act of purchasing coffee at your local cafe. The price you pay reflects not just the cost of coffee beans, but information about weather patterns in Colombia, shipping rates across the Pacific, warehouse availability in port cities, fuel costs for transportation, labor conditions at processing facilities, consumer preferences shifting toward different varieties, and thousands of other factors that change daily. No team of experts could gather all this information, process it correctly, and update prices accordingly across millions of products. Yet the price system accomplishes this task automatically through the interactions of people pursuing their own interests. The Colombian farmer who notices unusual weather adjusts his planting schedule. The shipper facing port delays raises transportation prices. The retailer seeing increased demand for premium varieties adjusts orders accordingly. Each participant knows only a tiny fraction of the total information affecting coffee prices, but their individual responses to changing conditions create collective intelligence far superior to any expert analysis. The price system transforms isolated fragments of knowledge into coordinated social action without requiring any single mind to comprehend the entire process. Take a moment to observe how prices around you respond to changing conditions. When a storm disrupts regional transportation, local gas prices rise before most people even hear weather reports. When a new technology reduces production costs, prices begin falling before economists finish analyzing the innovation's impact. The price system processes and communicates information faster than any expert committee could meet to discuss it. This information processing superiority explains why centrally planned economies consistently fail to match market performance. Central planners can gather statistics about past production, but they cannot access the distributed knowledge that enables real-time adaptation to changing conditions. They can analyze yesterday's supply and demand, but they cannot anticipate tomorrow's innovations or shifts in consumer preferences. The price mechanism functions as democracy of knowledge, giving equal voice to everyone who participates in markets regardless of their formal education or expert credentials. The small retailer who notices customers asking for a particular product contributes knowledge that shapes prices and production decisions. The individual consumer who switches to a substitute product sends signals that redirect resources toward more valued uses. Professional economists often miss this democratic dimension of markets because they focus on mathematical models rather than knowledge coordination processes. They analyze price distortions without recognizing that every price reflects genuine information about scarcity, preferences, and opportunities that no central authority possesses. The price system's knowledge coordinating function explains why socialist calculation proved impossible despite the brilliant economists who attempted it. Oscar Lange and Abba Lerner developed mathematically elegant models showing how central planners could simulate market outcomes through computational methods. Their error was assuming that prices represent simple mathematical relationships rather than compressed knowledge that emerges only through actual market processes. Without private property and genuine competition, there is no mechanism for discovering what prices should be. Central planners can observe market prices in other economies, but they cannot replicate the knowledge discovery process that generates those prices. They can copy the results of market coordination, but they cannot duplicate the cause. Understanding the price system as democracy of knowledge transforms how you evaluate expert proposals for price controls, subsidies, and market interventions. Every intervention disrupts the information processing function that coordinates the knowledge of millions of people. Even well-intentioned policies guided by expert analysis inevitably reduce the economy's ability to discover and respond to changing conditions. Chapter 4: Scientific Pretensions and Social Control. The most dangerous experts are those who believe social phenomena can be controlled with the same precision as natural phenomena. This scientific pretension, what I call scientism, transforms genuine science into an ideology that justifies unlimited intervention in human affairs under the banner of rational policymaking. True science succeeds by isolating variables, controlling conditions, and discovering laws that enable prediction and control. These methods have revolutionized our understanding of physics, chemistry, and biology. But when social scientists attempt to apply identical methods to human behavior, they create a false impression of knowledge and control that leads to systematic policy failures. The scientific mindset assumes that social problems can be solved through the same approach that builds bridges or designs computers: gather data, identify patterns, formulate theories, and implement solutions. Government agencies hire PhD economists to design tax policies, statisticians to optimize welfare programs, and behavioral scientists to modify social outcomes through nudges and incentives. This approach ignores fundamental differences between natural and social phenomena. Natural objects don't change their behavior when scientists study them. Water boils at the same temperature regardless of whether chemists are watching. But human beings modify their actions when they learn about social policies designed to influence them. They develop strategies to game welfare systems, find loopholes in tax codes, and respond to incentives in ways their designers never anticipated. The scientific expert assumes human behavior follows discoverable laws that enable social engineering. They believe unemployment can be cured through mathematical models relating inflation to job creation. Poverty can be eliminated through statistical analysis of income distribution, and crime can be reduced through computational algorithms predicting criminal behavior. But human action emerges from subjective judgments about uncertain futures, not mechanical responses to objective stimuli. People make choices based on their personal values, unique circumstances, and individual assessments of available options. These subjective factors cannot be captured by statistical methods or predicted through mathematical models. During my years developing spontaneous order theory, I observed how scientific thinking corrupts even well-intentioned policy efforts. Urban planners use traffic flow studies to design transportation systems, then wonder why actual driving patterns differ from their models. Education experts apply learning research to design curricula, then puzzle over why student performance varies from their predictions. The problem isn't that these experts lack intelligence or dedication, it's that they misunderstand the nature of what they're trying to control. Social order emerges through the interactions of purposeful individuals, not through mechanical forces that operate independently of human consciousness and choice. Scientism becomes particularly dangerous when it provides intellectual justification for expanding government power. If social problems result from discoverable causes that experts can identify and control, then rational policy requires giving those experts authority to implement their solutions. The scientific mindset transforms political questions about the proper scope of government into technical questions about optimal policy design. This transformation eliminates genuine political debate by treating policy disagreements as scientific disputes to be resolved by expert analysis rather than democratic deliberation. Citizens who question expert recommendations are dismissed as ignorant or irrational, while politicians who resist scientific policy advice are accused of anti-intellectual bias. The scientific expert believes their research grants them authority not only to understand social phenomena but to reshape them according to rational principles. They see existing institutions, markets, families, communities, traditions, as irrational remnants of pre-scientific thinking that should be replaced by consciously designed alternatives based on scientific knowledge. But this constructivist approach ignores the possibility that existing institutions embody wisdom discovered through long processes of trial and error that no scientific analysis can fully comprehend. Traditional practices often serve functions that experts fail to recognize because those functions emerge from complex interactions rather than conscious design. Recognizing scientism means distinguishing between legitimate scientific knowledge and illegitimate claims to scientific authority over social organization. Genuine science increases our understanding of the world, but scientism uses the prestige of science to justify expert control over human choices that should remain free. Chapter 5: Evolutionary Wisdom versus Constructivist Arrogance. The institutions that enable human prosperity, language, law, money, markets, were not designed by experts but evolved through countless generations of trial and error. Understanding this evolutionary process reveals why expert attempts to improve society through rational reconstruction typically destroy the very mechanisms that make improvement possible. Consider how language develops. No committee of linguists designed English grammar, yet it enables precise communication among millions of speakers. Rules emerge through usage, persist because they facilitate understanding, and change gradually as circumstances require. Attempts to impose rational language reforms, like the French Academy's efforts to control French vocabulary, consistently fail because living languages evolve faster than experts can analyze them. The same evolutionary process creates effective legal systems. Common law develops through judicial decisions responding to specific disputes rather than comprehensive legislative codes written by legal experts. Each court case adds incremental knowledge about how general principles apply to particular circumstances. Over centuries, this process creates sophisticated legal frameworks that surpass anything designed by even the most brilliant legal scholars. Markets represent perhaps the most remarkable example of evolutionary wisdom. No economist designed the complex networks of production, distribution, and exchange that enable modern prosperity. These systems emerged through countless individual adaptations to local conditions, competitive pressures, and changing opportunities. Each successful innovation spreads through imitation, while failed experiments disappear without disrupting the entire system. The evolutionary perspective reveals why constructivist experts consistently underestimate the sophistication of existing institutions. When they observe traditional practices that seem inefficient or irrational, they assume these practices persist only through ignorance or resistance to change. They fail to consider that apparent inefficiencies might serve functions they don't understand or address problems they haven't recognized. During my observation of various economic systems, I noticed that expert reforms often eliminate traditional practices that perform crucial but invisible functions. Agricultural experts promote mechanized farming techniques that increase short-term yields but destroy soil systems that sustain productivity for centuries. Urban planners replace organic neighborhoods with rationally designed housing projects that eliminate the informal social networks that maintain community safety and cohesion. The constructivist mindset assumes that any institution not consciously designed for specific purposes must be arbitrary and inefficient. Experts see traditional practices as obstacles to rational organization rather than repositories of accumulated wisdom about what actually works under real-world conditions. But evolutionary institutions possess characteristics that conscious design cannot replicate. They adapt automatically to changing conditions without requiring central coordination. They incorporate knowledge from countless participants rather than depending on the limited understanding of any individual or committee. They maintain diversity that enables experimentation and resilience in the face of unexpected challenges. The tension between evolutionary wisdom and constructivist arrogance appears clearly in contemporary policy debates. Healthcare experts design insurance systems based on statistical models of risk distribution, then wonder why traditional community and family support networks weaken as formal systems expand. Education experts create standardized curricula based on learning research, Then puzzle over why schools lose the flexibility to adapt to local conditions and individual student needs. This doesn't mean that all traditional practices are perfect or that conscious improvement is impossible. But it does mean that reformers should approach existing institutions with humility, recognizing that practices which have survived long periods of selection probably serve functions that analytical study might miss. Successful reform builds on evolutionary foundations rather than attempting complete reconstruction. The most effective innovations emerge through competitive processes that allow voluntary adoption and gradual improvement rather than comprehensive replacement mandated by expert authority. Understanding evolutionary versus constructivist approaches transforms how you evaluate policy proposals. Ask whether reforms build on existing institutions or attempt to replace them entirely. Consider whether changes emerge through voluntary adoption or require coercive implementation. Examine whether innovations preserve the adaptive mechanisms that enabled original success or concentrate decision-making authority in ways that eliminate feedback and correction. The choice between evolutionary and constructivist approaches ultimately determines whether societies develop greater sophistication through distributed learning or lose accumulated wisdom through expert hubris. Chapter 6: The Democratic Conceit: Why Majority Rule Doesn't Create Knowledge. Democracy represents humanity's greatest political achievement, but democratic decision-making cannot overcome the knowledge problem that makes central planning impossible. The same limitations that prevent individual experts from possessing comprehensive knowledge apply equally to democratic majorities, no matter how large or well-informed. This insight challenges one of our most cherished political beliefs, that democratic processes automatically generate wise policies because they aggregate the knowledge and preferences of entire populations. While democracy provides essential protection against tyranny and ensures government accountability, it cannot create knowledge that doesn't exist or substitute collective ignorance for individual expertise. Consider how democratic decision-making actually works in complex policy areas. Voters choose between candidates based on simplified positions on complicated issues they cannot fully understand. Politicians make promises about outcomes they cannot control. Interest groups lobby for policies that benefit their members regardless of broader consequences. The entire process operates through what I call rational ignorance. It makes no sense for individual voters to invest time learning about issues where their single vote makes no meaningful difference. The democratic process tends to favor policies with visible benefits and hidden costs over policies with hidden benefits and visible costs, regardless of their actual efficiency. Voters support agricultural subsidies because lower food prices are immediately apparent, while the broader economic costs remain invisible. They approve minimum wage increases because higher wages for employed workers are obvious, while job losses for potential workers remain unseen. Professional politicians understand these dynamics and craft policies accordingly. They promise benefits that voters can observe while structuring costs in ways that remain hidden or appear much later. They focus on intentions rather than results, claiming credit for trying to solve problems regardless of whether their policies actually work. The knowledge problem makes democratic oversight of expert policymaking particularly ineffective. Voters cannot evaluate complex regulations they don't understand, monitor bureaucratic agencies they rarely encounter, or assess the long-term consequences of policies whose effects unfold over decades. Democratic accountability becomes a ritual that provides the appearance of control without the substance of genuine oversight. This doesn't argue against democracy. It argues for limiting the scope of democratic decision-making to areas where voters can reasonably evaluate performance and hold officials accountable. Democracy works best when it protects individual rights and maintains general rules of social cooperation, not when it attempts to manage the detailed coordination of economic activity. The confusion between democratic legitimacy and practical effectiveness leads to what I call the democratic conceit, the belief that majority support automatically makes policies wise or workable. This conceit justifies expanding government authority into areas where neither experts nor voters possess the knowledge necessary for effective central management. Democratic processes excel at expressing preferences about general principles and ultimate values, but they cannot substitute for market processes in discovering efficient resource allocation or optimal production methods. Voters can democratically decide that society should provide healthcare for all citizens, but they cannot democratically determine the most efficient methods for organizing medical services or allocating scarce medical resources. The price system aggregates information about actual scarcity and genuine preferences revealed through voluntary exchange, while democratic voting aggregates opinions about perceived problems and preferred solutions that may bear little relationship to reality. Both systems serve important functions, but they cannot substitute for each other without destroying their respective effectiveness. Second engagement moment. Observe how democratic politics handles technical issues in your community. Notice how local debates about zoning, transportation, or education focus on symbolic positions rather than practical knowledge about what actually works. Consider how voter preferences relate to the complex trade-offs involved in implementing policies. Understanding the limits of democratic knowledge helps explain why the most successful societies combine democratic political systems with market economic systems. Democracy ensures that political power remains accountable to citizens, while markets ensure that economic coordination remains responsive to actual conditions rather than political preferences. This division of labor between political and economic institutions breaks down when democratic majorities attempt to control market outcomes directly. The result is neither effective democracy nor efficient markets, but rather politicized economics that serves neither democratic accountability nor economic coordination. Recognizing democratic limitations means supporting democracy within its proper sphere while resisting democratic encroachment on areas where spontaneous order provides superior coordination mechanisms. Chapter 7: Digital Age Vindication: How Technology Proves Hayek Right. The digital revolution has provided the most dramatic vindication of spontaneous order theory in human history. Technologies that embody my insights about knowledge, coordination, and decentralized intelligence now surround us, demonstrating daily why expert planning fails and spontaneous organization succeeds. Consider the Internet itself, a network that connects billions of devices without central control. No expert committee designed its structure, no government agency manages its growth, and no planning authority determines what information should flow where. Yet it coordinates communication more effectively than any centrally planned system could achieve. The Internet's architecture embodies the principle that complex order emerges through simple rules enabling voluntary interaction rather than comprehensive design by technical experts. Wikipedia represents another stunning example of spontaneous order surpassing expert organization. Traditional encyclopedias required teams of credentialed experts, professional editors, and publishing authorities to create authoritative knowledge resources. Wikipedia emerges through voluntary contributions from anyone with knowledge to share, yet it achieves greater accuracy, broader coverage, and faster updates than any expert-compiled alternative. The cryptocurrency revolution provides perhaps the most direct application of my monetary theory to contemporary conditions. Bitcoin operates without central banks, government oversight, or expert management, yet it maintains monetary integrity through algorithmic rules and network consensus. Its success demonstrates that monetary systems can emerge spontaneously through technological innovation rather than requiring state authority or expert administration. Digital marketplaces like Amazon, Uber, and Airbnb coordinate millions of transactions daily through algorithmic matching rather than expert planning. These platforms succeed by facilitating voluntary exchange rather than attempting to control outcomes. They aggregate information from countless participants to optimize matching, pricing, and service delivery in ways that no team of experts could replicate through centralized management. The knowledge problem that I identified in theoretical terms now manifests clearly in digital contexts. Social media algorithms that attempt to optimize user engagement create filter bubbles and manipulation that their designers never intended. AI systems trained on historical data perpetuate biases that expert programmers tried to eliminate. Automated trading systems create market volatility that financial experts cannot predict or control. These failures occur not because of insufficient expertise but because of the fundamental impossibility of centrally controlling complex adaptive systems. The most sophisticated algorithms cannot replicate the knowledge discovery process that emerges through voluntary interaction among diverse participants pursuing their own goals. Contemporary applications of spontaneous order principles appear throughout the digital economy. Open-source software development coordinates thousands of programmers without central management, creating more robust and innovative products than proprietary alternatives. Crowdfunding platforms enable investment decisions to emerge through distributed evaluation rather than expert analysis. Social networks organize information sharing through user preferences rather than editorial authority. The blockchain revolution extends these principles to new domains. Smart contracts enable automated enforcement of agreements without legal experts or judicial oversight. Decentralized autonomous organizations coordinate group activities through algorithmic governance rather than traditional management structures. Token economies create incentive systems that align individual and collective interests without expert mechanism design. Yet many policy experts resist these developments, preferring regulatory frameworks that reassert centralized control over spontaneous coordination. They propose antitrust actions against digital platforms, content moderation requirements for social media, and central bank digital currencies to compete with cryptocurrencies. These interventions ignore the lessons that digital spontaneous order could teach about effective social coordination. The digital age reveals both the power and the limits of spontaneous order. While decentralized systems excel at coordination and innovation, they also create new challenges that require institutional responses. The key insight is that these challenges should be addressed through evolutionary adaptation of existing institutions rather than expert redesign of entire systems. Understanding how technology vindicates spontaneous order theory provides practical guidance for evaluating contemporary policy proposals. Support innovations that enable voluntary coordination and distributed decision-making. Resist interventions that concentrate authority in expert institutions. Favor regulations that protect the conditions for spontaneous order rather than attempting to control its outcomes. The future belongs to societies that embrace the knowledge-coordinating power of spontaneous organization while maintaining the institutional foundations that make voluntary cooperation possible. Conclusion. The shocking truth about expertise is not that experts lack intelligence or good intentions, but that the nature of knowledge itself makes central coordination impossible regardless of who attempts it. The most educated, well-meaning experts inevitably fail when they try to replace the distributed intelligence of free institutions with their concentrated understanding. This doesn't diminish the value of genuine expertise within its proper sphere. Engineers should design bridges, doctors should treat patients, and scientists should investigate natural phenomena. The danger emerges when expert knowledge becomes the justification for expert authority over areas that require coordination rather than control. The knowledge problem reveals why free societies consistently outperform planned alternatives. Not because markets are perfect, but because they provide superior mechanisms for discovering, communicating, and coordinating the dispersed knowledge that no expert can possess. The price system, legal evolution, and voluntary association enable millions of people to cooperate effectively without requiring any single mind to comprehend their total interaction. Your intellectual responsibility is to maintain healthy skepticism toward expert claims while supporting the institutional foundations that enable spontaneous order. Question policies that concentrate decision-making authority. support innovations that enhance voluntary coordination, defend the price system, rule of law, and private property that make prosperous society possible. The experts will always promise they can plan better outcomes than free people can achieve through voluntary cooperation. History reveals this promise to be humanity's most persistent and dangerous illusion.